the hypothesis that the Prophet ﷺ went through a midlife crisis, that he was possessed, that he was suffering from some psychological disorder, or that he was thirsty for recognition and power, is not only unconvincing, it's contrary to what psychoanalysis tells us today. It is indeed the altruism, devotion, constancy demonstrated by the Prophet ﷺ that inspires trust. Like once you trust the messenger, now you take the message into consideration. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. So in chapter 3, the second section, the Islamic paradigm, we've looked at the authenticity of the Quran and Hadith. And now that you can trust these sources, now you can go through the sources and build the character of the Prophet ﷺ. So section B, a honest, selfless, and persistent man ﷺ. So in this section, I argue that based on the reported narrations, the Hadith, the life of Muhammad ﷺ can only inspire admiration and trust. From a social point of view, Muhammad ﷺ was an established man. He was married, had a job. Before prophethood, he was already respected by all. Although he was an orphan, he was of a noble lineage, and his foster care, Abu Talib, was a senior dignitary. He was well placed in society, respected as well. So he was recognized for his good conduct, good moral, and sincerity. He was nicknamed Al-Amin, trustworthy. In terms of his environment, he lived in his tribe in Mecca, in an arid land, in a desertic land. It is this, I would say, apparent lack of natural resources and harsh climate that in a way protected that region from the surrounding superpowers, like the Sassanid, like Persian Empire, and Roman Byzantine Empire. Because there's no clear natural resources, why bother so far away from the main city centers? So yes, you have the caravans, the summer and winter caravans, but these, in a global scale, were insignificant. If you compare the caravans within the Arabic Peninsula to the maritime trade that happens just next door between the Roman Sassanid empires, Byzantine and Sassanid empires, the empire of the Negus, it was an empire at the time, to now called Yemen, and then to India. That was the main trade route. Then compared to this, the winter and summer trades were insignificant. Certainly, just to say that the place was not that wealthy, and maybe that lack of wealth was an advantage because it protected that region from surrounding superpowers. So his prophecy started at the age of 40, and over the course of the next 23 years, Muhammad ﷺ succeeded in rectifying deep-seated customs through establishing a way of life and a religion that affected the economic and social order locally in Arabia and globally. That's mind-boggling if you think of it. So Muhammad ﷺ literally changed the course of the world. He established the foundations of an empire which in only a few decades overtook the superpowers of the time, again, Sassanid and Byzantine, Roman Empire. So that expansion, the expansion of Islam initially, yes, you can always find explanations, social, political, economical explanations on how it expanded so fast, so much. But still, in history, that's a first. It's impressive to think that people with no natural resources, really limited natural resources, can overtake the superpowers in only a few decades. that really should build a trust that if Allah wants something, He will do it, regardless of the material context following. During those 23 years of prophethood, the Prophet ﷺ sacrificed everything in order to fulfill his mission, that of conveying the message of Islam. So when the leaders of the time saw the power being threatened by the new worldview, Islamic worldview, they tried to silence the Prophet ﷺ by offering the woman wealth and power. He rejected this worldly bargain, and as a response, he ended up being rejected by his own people. He remained faithful to his principles, even in the most difficult moment of his life, when he lost the most influential members of his family, the uncle Abu Talib, who provided him with social protection, as well as his wife Khadija, who was a source of both emotional support and economic support. The Prophet ﷺ spent all of his possessions for the cause of Islam. He suffered physical and psychological abuses like systematic tortures of the companions, rejection and subsequent pelting, stoning at Taif. His enemies tried to assassinate him and betrayed him in the most difficult moments. Like you have the assassination attempt the day of his departure to Medina, as well as the treachery of the Jewish communities during the Battle of the Trenches. And as soon as his situation finally improved in Medina, like establishment of intertribal peace treaty of Hudaybiyah, or the conquest of Mecca and subsequent recognition of his political authority by the surrounding tribes, the Prophet ﷺ opted for a life of extreme material simplicity and forgave his bitter enemies for the sake of Allah, for the sake of God, in hope of his reward. So when you read this, when you see that being said about the person, it gives confidence. So in light of his behavior, the hypothesis that the Prophet ﷺ went through a midlife crisis, that he was possessed, that he was suffering from some psychological disorder, or that he was thirsty for recognition and power, is not only unconvincing, it's contrary to what psychoanalysis tells us today. Like, it doesn't fit. You cannot accuse the Prophet ﷺ of such things. It just doesn't work. There's no evidence at all. On the contrary, all the evidence here shows someone who's trustworthy, stable, emotionally, psychologically stable. Indeed, what would push a person to sacrifice everything, his life, his economic and social status, and stability of life, to live a life of misery, materially speaking, and suffer the physical and psychological harms such as those endured by the Prophet ﷺ? Why would you suffer so much? He could, ﷺ, simply be quiet, go maybe away in this outskirt of Mecca and live happily with his family, keeping the message for himself. He would have avoided all the torture, all the assassination attempts, all the losses, material, human, and others. But he didn't. He was driven by a mission. And the dedication to that mission gives trust. Both the dedication that the Prophet showed, alayhi salam, and the mission itself that we will analyze subsequently give trust. So even while he alayhi salam was in search of truth before the prophecy arrived, before the prophetic mission, there are no narrations which implies madness or megalomania. Like we know the Prophet alayhi salam used to go to the cave to meditate for a few hours, sometimes for a few days in a row, in search of something. But even these meditations, at best, they imply care for a society. So on the contrary, the fact that he was trusted and loved by his contemporaries, friends, and future enemies illustrates an established psychological stability and integrity. It is indeed the altruism, devotion, constancy demonstrated by the Prophet ﷺ that inspires trust. It's like his best friend alayhi salam, Abu Bakr. When Abu Bakr heard that a prophet appeared, that prophecy came, and that it was his friend Muhammad alayhi salam, he was okay, of course. He's such a good man. Who else could it be? He agreed. And that's why Abu Bakr believed in him. Initially, Abu Bakr was the person who knew maybe most the Prophet alayhi salam. He was one of the earliest and the closest friend of him. And that shows he's the one who knows him the most intimately, after his wife and children, of course. And the fact that he, Abu Bakr, agreed immediately to follow Muhammad as a prophet shows that also the prophet was of an exceptional character even before the prophethood. So again, when you read the hadith and you learn about the Prophet ﷺ altruism, devotion, constancy, that builds trust. To summarize that section, while the veracity of the Quran as a historical manuscript is established, the corpus of the hadith is classified on a probability scale. Out of the about 600,000 narrations that have been preserved, about 10,000 are ranked at the top of this probability scale, like the cream of the cream. These narratives, by describing like everyday life encounters of the Prophet ﷺ, allows me to evaluate Muhammad ﷺ, the man. They enable me to appreciate his motives, his integrity. These narratives help me build trust in the person, in Muhammad ﷺ. And it is only once trust is established that these narratives, along with the Quran, can serve as a basis to evaluate the message of Islam, including its belief, perspectives on life, and practices. Like once you trust the messenger, now you take the message into consideration. What is Allah trying to convey, to tell you through the Quran? That will be for the next section, inshallah. وجزاك الله خيرا. والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله.